folks. Zach Osterman, Alex McCarthy. It's not so late that I've forgotten which one of us is not me. It is about 1:15 in the morning, which is actually probably earlier than we thought this would be.
Yeah, I thought we might be ending later.
Yeah, ending right now. But the game did move faster than we thought. Missouri 45, Indiana 28. The last 8 points, kind of window dressing. Good for anyone who took the over, apparently, in this game, because it was either, depending on who you believed, what I heard tonight was either 70.5 or 71.5. So that last Indiana touchdown put the gamblers over the edge. Obviously didn't do much to assuage Indiana's grief or embarrassment or whatever. And this was, this was frustrating, I think, in its own way. When you look at that Navy loss, sort of the main talking point was just simply that Indiana couldn't figure out a way to game plan and adjust to the triple option and beat the triple option. But this was a game that Indiana felt like it wanted because it felt like it stacked up matchup-wise. It felt like, the offense wasn't going to be all gimmicky or weird. This was just kind of a game where Indiana was playing what it considered sort of a peer of an opponent. Missouri's an SEC team, went 5-7 last year. Pretty good offense, maybe not quite so good on defense. And all things considered, Missouri did not play incredibly well today on defense, 475 yards and 28 points allowed. But the reality is Indiana just, start to finish, it felt like, and this is a very generic thing to say, but it felt like the Hoosiers were just never in sync, not on offense, not on defense. It didn't feel, it very rarely felt like they were in control of the game, even when they were getting stops, forcing turnovers, sacks, scoring points. I mean, Missouri races out to a 14-0 lead. Then Indiana kind of answers that with a couple quick bursts. And then from there, Missouri just kind of takes control. And it never really felt like, to use another sort of kind of lame term, kind of, real generic term, Indiana never really had mojo tonight.
Right. I mean, other than a couple drives in the second quarter there, like you said, they were just kind of, there was the 77-yard pass to Cody Latimer, just like a couple big plays. Other than that, they just really never put a solid, cohesive drive together.
We did not see the offense that even against Navy we saw that was methodical and efficient and just kind of, play by play was attacking and constantly keeping a defense off balance, getting downfield.
And looking like it knew, like everything was going according to plan. Today, it never, I mean, there's the first pass went for a first down, I think, and then after that, there was a chop block, and that kind of killed that drive, and there was just all kinds of stuff that just really didn't go Indiana's way. And even when things were going their way, they couldn't figure out a way to capitalize on it. And part of it was they forced those 3 turnovers in the first 5 possessions against Missouri's offense. But the thing was, 2 of them were interceptions inside their own 5-yard line, and another one was also in their territory. So it was almost, Kevin Wilson said this after the game, it was almost more like just getting a defensive stop. Really, I mean, it wasn't like
one was a turn to the 28. One, I think Greg Heben just fell it. He had to dive
right on the goal line.
He was on
basically.
the one.
Yeah. So there were, I mean, even the plays that went well didn't go well enough to really change that much, and they were just kind of behind the 8 ball for a long time in terms of field position, and then even that they kind of lost at a certain point. But they just really on offense they were just never really able to establish the run, and part of that was just because they didn't run as much as they just have said that they wanted to.
And I mean that was something Wilson, I think, sort of tacitly admitted post game he was disappointed with. Was the offensive play calling. Indiana finished with 98 yards rushing on 26 carries. By comparison, first of all, by comparison, Indiana threw 53 passes, and not all of those came simply because they were playing from behind. And the other thing, the other sort of comparison to make, Missouri goes 50 carries for 280 yards. So, I mean, there was a commitment on one side to establish the run, and there just kind of wasn't on the other. And it was strange given the fact that, one, I mean, Nobody put up great numbers, but I mean, for most of the night, Tevin Coleman was averaging about 4 yards a carry, and he ripped off a few longer ones, a few of 7, 8, 10, 12, I think as long as 14. But you felt like if there had been a greater commitment to run the ball just a little bit more.
It seemed like there was something there.
Yes, exactly. Like maybe, a 4-yard gains in the second quarter turned into 6 and 8-yard gains in the third, start to wear a defense down. And it was interesting that they didn't do that because what gave Indiana problems on offense as much as anything all night was Missouri's defensive line and all of the movement that they presented. Mm-hmm. They did a lot of stunting and twisting. That was kind of what we heard they would do during the week, but it was also what they did today, and it was clear that Indiana wasn't handling it well. They got to Nate Sudfeld a lot. They actually didn't. The Tigers didn't record a sack tonight. They did pick Sudfeld off 3 times. In 10 games in college coming into tonight, he'd thrown 3 interceptions. He threw 3 tonight. One of them really was probably the game changer. Might not really have been his fault so much. It was the one that was returned for a touchdown at the end of the first half.
And when they were down 7 and driving to try and
Wilson and Sudfeld gave sort of not quite the same explanation. Sudfeld said he thought maybe he got a protection wrong, like he called out the wrong protection. Wilson basically said they were going to try and just quick chop and quick hit that defensive end so that he didn't have time to maybe get around Jason Spriggs, who did not have a very good game himself, but he was not alone in that. They were just going to kind of quick hit him, and the defensive ends recognized what was happening, recognized that Indiana was going for a slant route, Cody Latimer coming left to right, on I think like 2nd and 5 or something like that. And he just kind of jumped up and got his hands on it and then made a good play to knock it down, catch it, and get to the end zone. But in general, it was just interesting to see Indiana's approach to the run game because it felt like the basic thing and we're not, please understand, we're not trying to be armchair quarterbacks here or coaches or offensive coordinators, whatever. But one of the basic things you do when you're having problems, particularly the pass rush, is you run the ball a little bit more. And you try to maybe soften up the middle of the defensive line and not allow defensive ends and linebackers to really just kind of focus on getting downhill and attacking the edges and getting to your quarterback and collapsing that pocket, moving things around, making him uncomfortable. It was strange that they didn't run the ball tonight. But it was also just kind of indicative of a night where it felt like Indiana as a whole team, offense, defense, special teams, also, even the coaching staff, it felt like everything was just a little bit out of sync, and I know that is incredibly unscientific, but it really just felt all night like Indiana, I don't think you expected them to come in and win this game 52-10 or anything like that. Even if they played well, they may not have won. Missouri looks like a decent team. But you just felt all night like you just kind of like everything that was happening, you just sort of raised an eyebrow at it and thought, what is wrong tonight that wasn't wrong last week? Wasn't even really, in a lot of ways, wrong against Navy.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like Indiana was off.
Yeah, and it's just one of those
Indiana had a cold.
Yeah, it was very hard to explain. I mean, it's kind of like last year where you look at the numbers and you see
it did feel
the offense scores 28 points. They put up 400 some yards, and the defense gives up 38 points. And so you're thinking, just looking at the numbers, you're thinking, okay, the defense, again, it's the Indiana defense, and they're letting them down. But if you're watching the game, you're thinking, this is almost completely or not completely, but a lot of this is on the offense. It was just hard to explain that they just couldn't figure out the holes in the defense. They couldn't figure out what worked, what didn't. They didn't really commit to that much. I mean, it seemed like there were a couple of screenplays that really worked, but then we would see them go a couple of series without doing that, and then throwing 3 incompletions and punting. I mean, it was almost as if they just weren't committing really to anything and we're just trying things out for about 3 quarters and then realizing, well, we're too far behind now to really make this a game. So it did have a feel very much of last year where
I love that BTN, the Big Ten Network, is showing Maryland highlights.
Oh, and Rutgers also won.
Yeah, and Maryland and Rutgers are both on the Big Ten Network. Go early, BTN.
Yeah, no kidding. There's Rutgers.
But yeah, I mean, you're right, and I mean, I think there was, and not to harp on the run game, but just sort of to illustrate that point, there was a point where Indiana, I think in the third quarter, ran the ball twice with Coleman, and he got like 3 yards and then 8 yards, and so he got a first down. I think they probably started at their own 25. maybe their own 20 after a punt. And then, so Coleman gets 11 yards on 2 carries. Second one's pretty nice. And then they throw 3 straight incompletions and punt. And it's just that feeling like it felt like you really couldn't tell what they were trying to do. Like what last year, at least, there were moments where the offense would get this way, but you could see there were a lot of bubble screens and swing passes and slip screens, and you could see that the coaching staff felt like it couldn't run the ball, so it was trying to at least use a short passing game to maybe open things up, soften up a defense inside, weaken that pass rush a little bit, and then try and take its shots downfield. You didn't really ever feel tonight like you had a good idea of what the coaching staff, what the goal was, what the end product was supposed to be, obviously we didn't see a lot of them, so maybe this is fair to say or not, but what did the ideal touchdown drive look like against Missouri? You could have said that against Bowling Green. It looked like a couple runs, quick pass, maybe a swing, and then a little bit of a pump and go, see if you can hit somebody over the top, that kind of thing. Tonight, as you said, look, if I've never been one to play too much with but if this happened or if that happened, but you have one breakdown at the end of the game and Shane Wing gets behind a defense 68 yards on another broken protection. Trey Roberson was kind of scrambling for his life when he threw the pass. And then you've got that one Cody Latimer basically 8-yard crossing route that turns into a 77-yard gain, sets up an Indiana touchdown. Other than those 2 big plays, you take those away and this doesn't even look that. And again, I know that is not a totally fair way of looking at it, but there was a feeling almost, especially in the first 3 quarters, Indiana's success came more from its talent than from what its coaches were calling, what its players were trying to execute and not succeeding. It really just was, Kevin Wilson kind of said after the game, it really was a loss that probably should be pinned a little bit on everybody.
Yeah. He said, he used that old term, not, point of finger, but point of thumb. Just kind of talking about at me. He was referring to pointing a thumb at me. But just kind of on the coaching staff, on not necessarily failing to have them prepare for the game, but it just didn't seem like they were as well organized as maybe they, as cohesive of a game plan as they did, in the games that they've won and even against Navy. It was kind of surprising to see that. I thought from watching Missouri play, from watching Indiana play, I thought they were 2 fairly similar teams in the way they approached the game and the way they ran their offenses. And I thought this would be just kind of a back and forth, where they kind of understand each other fairly well, but it just seemed like Indiana came in and just didn't really understand Missouri as well as maybe we expected them to do. So obviously there's a lot of work to do. They have 2 weeks. Wilson said the bye week comes at a pretty good time. It gives them a week off or a week more to prepare for their Big Ten opener against Penn State, and that certainly looks like an interesting one as well. But we'll see what progress we see from Indiana heading into that. So
yeah, I don't think the season's over. It's
far from it.
It's kind of a strange thing because Kevin Wilson always says that, and I mentioned this a little bit in my column tonight, but Kevin Wilson always says he doesn't want his players to think about expectations like bowl games and wins and losses. He wants them to compartmentalize to getting better week to week and then putting good practices into turning that into good performances, winning games, whatever. And that's fine, and I get that. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said for maybe some of this consistency there. Indiana doesn't yet maybe its potential, and I think a lot of people, more preseason publications than not had Indiana in a bowl game. So, it's not window dressing. I think a lot of people see this team, even if it's just on a surface level, and say, this is a good team. This is a team that's good enough to win 6 games, particularly in a weak Big Ten. It feels a little bit like Indiana sees that, and it just doesn't totally understand how to get there. It doesn't, and then you're kind of facing the problem that probably a lot of Indiana coaches have faced in the past, and you're certainly facing a problem that you can only fix with success. I mean, you can't learn how to win close games until you win close games. You can't learn how to, maybe bring a better performance in a game like Missouri, where you're talking about looking for a little more respect, where you're talking about this is kind of a like for like opponent. This is someone we can grade ourselves against because they are maybe of the same level of expectation and talent and potential that we are. You just get a feeling like this team, and there's probably more players than coaches, just because the coaches, a lot of them have been in winning situations before, but you just get a feeling like they just don't have a really strong appreciation for how to turn that potential into success. We've heard Kevin Wilson say so many times, we had a good week of practice. We had a good, even going back to last season, thought we had a good week of practice, didn't feel like it transferred over to the game. Well, why not? And I think Alex, shameless plug, is actually writing a story about it. But why doesn't it? I mean, is it because you're still young, which is certainly the case?
Yeah, he says that a lot. Yeah.
Is it because guys aren't focused? Is it just because, to be frank, this is Indiana and there's not a lot of winning here, and so that's a really hard habit to learn at a place like this? I don't know, but this was seen as a must-win game for Indiana. I mean, at one level, like if Indiana doesn't go to a bowl game this year, Kevin Wilson's not going to get fired. He's not going to be on the hot seat going in. Well, he might be if they just lose out from here. But I mean, if they go 4-8, 5-7, Fred Glass will probably want to stick with him at least a couple more years, barring some kind of ultimate meltdown. He gave him a 7-year contract, and that was then why he said he did it, because Glass is a huge proponent of this idea that you can't make a football program in 3 or 4 years. He constantly cites Barry Alvarez and the time he was given at Wisconsin, and how much he struggled at the beginning of his time there. He constantly cites Gary Barnett and what he did at Northwestern and sort of similar kind of situations. So, barring something absolutely catastrophic, Kevin Wilson's not on the hot seat at the end of this year. But it is an opportunity lost if they don't go to a bowl game. And this was seen as a must-win, not maybe even as much in the sense of if they lose this, there's no way they're going to go 4-4 in the Big Ten, because quite frankly, the Big Ten kind of stinks. The Big Ten is not very good. Indiana still, you can make an easy case they'll beat Purdue, they'll beat Illinois, and then they'll play tough against Penn State, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Michigan all. I mean, you can make a strong case for all four of those games being tight if Indiana's offense plays the way it did in the first 3 games and not necessarily this one. But this was a must-win because it was like, we get these guys at home, and we believe that we have graduated to a new level of success that means we can beat teams like this. Means that it's not even just... And this was, I mean... This wasn't like Wisconsin in 2010 or even last year. This wasn't an embarrassing loss. No. Indiana got thoroughly outclassed, but it wasn't. It was 2 teams that were decent, and one just played a heck of a lot better. But it wasn't like someone dominated and embarrassed the other. But that was kind of why I think a lot that this win seems frustrating to Indiana, is because they thought, if nothing else, this should be a tight game. We should be good enough to go toe-to-toe with a team like this and prove that we're ready for that kind of success and that kind of stage in the Big Ten. And they didn't do it.
No, they just didn't. And a couple of them said after the game it was a little bit more on us maybe than it was on Missouri. And Missouri played very well, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
they executed a lot better. But a lot of it was a little bit on Indiana as well.
Mm-hmm. So. A lot of it was a little bit.
A little. Yeah,
it's 1:35 in the morning. Nothing's making sense. Mm-hmm. We're going to shut it down because I'm rambling and he's falling asleep. Inside Indiana Overtime, as always. I guess bye week coming. Maybe we'll have one. Maybe we won't. Probably not. I don't know what there'll be to talk about. Right. Basketball practice.
True.
If this makes you feel better, it can actually start on Friday. Don't know if Indiana will start on Friday, but because of the rule change, they can start 6 weeks or technically 42 days before their first game. And for Indiana, that is September 27th, which is, I guess, since it's Sunday at 1:35 a.m. now, 5 days from now. Mm-hmm. So, for Alex McCarthy, I'm Zach Osterman. You've been watching Inside Indiana. Thanks for stopping by.